Black boy went to dinner at his millionaire girlfriend's house. Black waitress gives him a note with a warning that leaves him paralyzed. Get out of here. For words scribbled hastily on a linen napkin that made Marcus Thompson's blood run cold. At 22, an engineering student at Atlanta University, he had survived subtle prejudice in classrooms and dirty looks in elevators. But this was different. This was a warning. And it was about to explode into a story that would bring down one of the most powerful families in Beverly Hills. Marcus didn't come to the Whitmore Mansion to impress. He came because he loved Isabella, and she had insisted that it was time to meet her parents. An intimate family dinner, she had said. Just family and a few close friends. What she didn't mention was that this intimate dinner would be an event with 40 guests, all white, all rich, all staring at him as if he were a curiosity on display. From the moment he walked through the wrought iron gates of the $15 million estate, Marcus felt the weight of their stares. He had chosen his best suit, a Hugo Boss he had saved for months to buy. Navy blue tie, shoes polished to a shine. But even impeccably dressed, he was still the only black face in a sea of white privilege. And then came the note. From the waitress who served champagne with trembling hands and eyes full of silent terror. A woman who recognized the danger before he even realized he was walking into a trap. This isn't just a story about prejudice. It's about courage, about what happens when someone risks everything to protect a stranger. It's about the hidden layers of racism that still haunt places of privilege, and how one person's bravery can force a reckoning with justice. This is a black story. And if you've ever wondered how real change begins, this is how. Marcus Thompson was the kind of young man who turned silence into strategy. At 22, he had become one of the rising stars of Georgia Tech's electrical engineering program. The son of a nurse and a mechanic from Oakland, California, Marcus learned early on that excellence was not optional, it was survival. His first scientific calculator came from a church donation program. His first laptop came from a scholarship program for underprivileged students. At 16, he was already programming apps in the room he shared with his two younger brothers. At 19, he received a full scholarship to one of the best technical universities in the country. But success doesn't erase scars. Marcus was still that kid who learned to tie a tie by watching YouTube tutorials before his first internship interview. He didn't wear gold chains or flashy clothes. Marcus understood how people quickly judged a young black man by what he wore before listening to what he had to say. So when he met Isabella Whitmore in the university library 8 months ago, he had no idea who she really was. To him, she was just Bella, the green-eyed girl who studied literature and asked the best questions during seminars. She didn't mention that her last name was engraved on buildings all over Atlanta. She didn't talk about the mansion in Beverly Hills or her family's real estate empire. He discovered all this little by little, through Google searches and casual comments from classmates. But by the time he finally learned the truth, it was too late. He was in love. And she, apparently, was too. "My parents will love you," Isabella had said the week before, her fingers intertwined with his as they walked across campus. "They just want to see me happy." Marcus wanted to believe her. But a voice inside him, the same one that kept him alert in elevators full of white executives, whispered that maybe things weren't that simple. Because Marcus wasn't just an engineering student. He was a mirror. And that night, at the Whitmore Mansion, he was about to reflect a truth that the family had chosen to keep hidden for decades. The Whitmore property wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Located in the hills of Beverly Hills, the neoclassical mansion stretched across 3 acres of perfectly manicured gardens. Marble columns, a circular fountain in the center of the entrance, and a panoramic view of Los Angeles that was worth more than most homes in the country. Richard Whitmore had built his empire from scratch, or at least that was the official version. Starting with a small investment in real estate in the 1980s, he now controlled Whitmore Holdings, with properties valued at over $500 million. His wife, Catherine, came from old money, a family with roots dating back to the first settlers of California. For them, the house was not just a home. It was a theater where they performed the play of American perfection, a place where connections were made and deals were closed over glasses of $300 wine. When Marcus drove through the gates that Saturday night, he immediately realized that this was not the intimate dinner Isabella had described. There were at least 15 cars parked in the circular driveway, BMWs, Mercedes, a few Porsches. All black or silver, all gleaming. The butler who greeted him at the entrance was a middle-aged Filipino man, impeccably dressed but with eyes that avoided eye contact. Good evening, sir. The Whitmore family awaits you in the main hall. Marcus followed him through corridors lined with expensive art and discreetly lit. The walls displayed photographs of the family with politicians, celebrities, and business magnates. A gallery of power and influence. In the main hall, about 40 people circulated with glasses of champagne, their conversations creating a constant buzz of privilege. Italian-tailored suits, dresses that cost more than his parents' monthly salary, jewelry that caught the light from the crystal chandeliers. And in the center of it all, Marcus saw Isabella. She looked stunning in a navy blue dress, chatting animatedly with an older couple. When their eyes met, she smiled and waved, but there was something different in her expression. A tension he couldn't quite place. "Marcus," she called, rushing over. "You made it." He kissed her on the cheek, noticing how she stiffened slightly as a few guests glanced their way. "I thought it would just be family," he murmured softly. "Oh, you know how these things are," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "Some close friends ended up joining us. Come on, I want you to meet my parents." But as she guided him through the crowd, Marcus couldn't help but notice the whispers that followed them, the glances that lingered a second too long, the smiles that didn't reach their eyes. He didn't know it yet, but he had just stepped onto a stage where he was both the guest of honor and the main entertainment. And someone in the audience was about to hand him the script. Angela Santos moved through the Whitmore Mansion like a shadow. At 34, she had worked as a waitress at high-end events for over a decade, always invisible, always watching. A single mother of two, she needed this job. But what she had seen over the years in this house kept her awake at night. Angela wasn't just a waitress. She was a silent witness to a sinister tradition that the Whitmore family had practiced for years. A cruel form of entertainment they called cultural education for their social circles. She had seen it happen before. Young black men, always the daughter's boyfriends or friends' guests, were brought to these gatherings under the guise of social integration. The protocol was always the same: polite treatment at first, stronger drinks served by mistake, conversations that gradually became more provocative, until the situation culminated in some kind of public humiliation. The last one had been 6 months ago. A young resident doctor who was dating the daughter of one of Richard's partners. After a few special drinks, he had been provoked into discussing race politics. The conversation was discreetly recorded and then edited to make him appear radical and violent. The video circulated among white elite social circles as entertainment, and the young doctor lost his position at the hospital 2 weeks later. Angela knew because Catherine Whitmore had whispered instructions to the bartender half an hour earlier: "The drinks for the young black man, you know what to do." Stronger than usual. She knew because she had heard Richard explaining to a group of close friends, "It will be interesting to see how he behaves when he relaxes a little. Those boys from the suburbs always show their true colors when they drink." And she knew because she had seen Isabella, over the past 30 minutes, gradually moving away from Marcus, leaving him more isolated in the crowd, more vulnerable to the casual conversations that were being orchestrated around him. Angela carried a tray of champagne, watching Marcus from across the room. He was chatting politely with an older executive, unaware that the conversation was being subtly steered toward controversial topics. Unaware that the drink in his hand had 2 extra shots of alcohol compared to the others. She looked around. The discreet cameras positioned in the corners of the room. The predatory smiles of some of the guests. The way Isabella avoided looking directly at her boyfriend. Angela had a choice to make. Stay silent and keep her job, as she had done so many times before. Or risk everything to save a young man she didn't even know. She reached into the pocket of her apron, took out a pen and a small napkin. With trembling hands, she wrote 4 words that would change everything. "Get out of here. Trap." Marcus was in the middle of a conversation about equal opportunities in the job market, with 3 older executives, when he felt a light touch on his arm. Angela had approached him silently, offering him a new glass of champagne. "Your drink, sir," she said softly, but her eyes carried an urgency that didn't match her formal words. "Thank you," Marcus replied, taking the glass. It was then that he felt the small piece of paper pressed against his palm along with the glass. Angela quickly moved away, but not before whispering almost inaudibly, "Restroom." 5 minutes. Marcus continued the conversation for a few more minutes, but his hands were shaking slightly. Discreetly, he unfolded the paper in his pocket. "Get out of here. Trap." His heart raced. He looked around the room with new eyes. The smile seemed different now, more calculated, more predatory. Isabella was across the room, avoiding his gaze. The executive in front of him was asking increasingly pointed questions about his experience with discrimination and his views on social movements. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely. "I need to use the restroom." He found Angela waiting in the hallway near the guest restroom. She looked nervously both ways before speaking. "Listen carefully," she whispered quickly. "You need to get out of here. Now." "What are you talking about?" "They do this regularly. They bring young black men to these parties, get them drunk, provoke embarrassing situations, and record everything. Then they use the videos to destroy their reputations." Marcus felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. "Isabella, does she know?" Angela nodded sadly. "She's part of the scheme. That's how they ruined the last guy. And the one before that. You're not the first." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've seen it happen too many times, and I can't stand by and watch lives being destroyed anymore." She took a deep breath. "Your drink has extra alcohol in it. In 20 minutes, you'll be saying things you wouldn't normally say. They'll provoke arguments about race, politics, anything controversial. Everything will be recorded." Marcus leaned against the wall, trying to process the information. "How can I prove this?" Angela hesitated, then took a small digital recorder out of her pocket. I've been recording some of these meetings. To protect myself. They've been doing this for years." She handed the device to Marcus. "This has conversations from the last 6 months. Plans, instructions, even laughter after the victims leave." Marcus stared at the recorder as if it were a grenade. "What do I do with this?" "Use it. Expose them. But first, get out of here before it's too late." At that moment, they heard footsteps approaching down the hallway. Angela quickly reverted to her role as a submissive waitress, picking up an empty tray from a nearby table. "Marcus." It was Isabella's voice. "Are you okay? Everyone is asking about you." Marcus tucked the recorder into his jacket's inside pocket and took a deep breath. By the time Isabella appeared around the corner of the hallway, he had made up his mind. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a smile. "I just needed a moment to process all this elegance." But inside, Marcus Thompson was no longer the polite young man trying to impress his girlfriend's family. He had become something much more dangerous, an intelligent, sober, evidence-based black man. And the Whitmores had no idea of the storm that was about to break over them. Back in the hall, Marcus saw everything with crystal clarity. The seemingly casual conversations now revealed their true nature, carefully crafted traps. One guest casually commented on affirmative action policies. Another mentioned urban crime problems. A third brought up cultural differences between communities. They all expected him to take the bait. Marcus played the game perfectly. He smiled, nodded, and gave measured diplomatic answers that clearly frustrated some of the provocateurs. When offered another drink, he accepted but pretended to drink, discreetly pouring the contents into potted plants when no one was looking. Meanwhile, he observed the micro-expressions of disappointment when he didn't react as expected. The whispers among the hosts. Isabella, who seemed increasingly nervous as the evening wore on without the expected show. That's when Richard Whitmore decided to be more direct. "Marcus," he said, approaching with a group of 5 older men. "We were discussing business opportunities in underserved communities. As someone who, has this unique perspective, what's your opinion on investing in urban areas?" It was a loaded question, designed to make Marcus sound as if he were speaking only on behalf of his race, or to get him to make generalizations that could be used against him. "Interesting question," Marcus replied calmly. "Actually, my area of expertise is electrical engineering, specifically renewable energy systems. But if you're interested in socially responsible investments, I can recommend some academic studies on sustainable economic development." Richard frowned. Clearly, this was not the answer he had hoped for. "Sure, but surely you have personal opinions on racial issues? On what your community really needs?" Now Marcus saw the trap completely. They wanted him to speak as a representative of all Black Americans, to make emotional statements that could be edited and twisted. "My community," Marcus said slowly, "is engineering students, clean technology researchers, and currently, this room full of interesting people. He smiled. Unless you're suggesting that I should identify with groups based solely on the color of my skin? An uncomfortable silence settled over the group. Richard was clearly frustrated. That's when Catherine Whitmore joined the conversation, and Marcus realized the gloves were finally off. "Oh dear," she said with a venomous smile, "there's no need to be so defensive. We fully support diversity. In fact, Richard just made a substantial donation to a school in Compton." The implication was clear: they were the benevolent saviors, and he should be grateful. Marcus felt anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. "How generous. I imagine it must be great for tax deductions as well." Catherine's smile faltered. A few guests laughed nervously. "Well," Richard said, his voice growing colder, "it seems someone has rather strong opinions about how others should spend their money." And there it was. The final provocation, designed to make him explode in anger, to justify everything they would say about him afterward. Marcus looked around the room. All eyes were on him now. The discreet cameras capturing every angle. Isabella finally staring at him, but with an expression he now recognized as anticipatory guilt. It was time to turn the tables. Marcus took his cell phone out of his pocket and, with a casual motion, began recording. "Actually," he said, his voice clear enough for the whole room to hear, "I'd love to continue this conversation. Especially the part about your family traditions with black guests." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could hear the ticking of the antique clock in the corner of the room, the almost imperceptible creaking of the wooden floor under the feet of the guests as they shifted uncomfortably. Richard Whitmore was the first to regain his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, young man." Marcus smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No? Then perhaps I can clarify." He took out the digital recorder Angela had given him and placed it on the nearest coffee table. "This device contains recordings of 6 months of your parties. Detailed plans of how you systematically humiliate black men brought into this house." Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Some guests seemed genuinely shocked, others clearly uncomfortable at being exposed. Catherine tried to laugh. "This is ridiculous. You're being paranoid." "Am I?" Marcus pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room through the small speaker. "It'll be interesting to see how he behaves when he relaxes a little. These boys from the suburbs always show their true colors when they drink." Richard's face visibly paled. Marcus continued, "And here's your wife instructing the bartender." Catherine's voice sounded clear. "Drinks for the young black guy, you know what to do." Stronger than usual. Now it was Catherine who looked like she was about to faint. "And my favorite," Marcus said, finding another excerpt, "where you discuss what happened to Dr. Kevin Williams, the resident you destroyed 6 months ago." The recording continued with cruel laughter and comments about how the young doctor had fallen right into the trap, and how hilarious it was to see him lose everything. The room was completely silent now. Several guests began to move toward the exit, clearly not wanting to be associated with what was being revealed. Isabella finally spoke, her voice just a whisper, "Marcus, I..." He turned to her, and for the first time his mask of control cracked slightly. "You what, Isabella? Are you going to tell me you didn't know? That you weren't part of all this?" Tears streamed down her face, but she couldn't deny it. Marcus looked around the room, making eye contact with each remaining person. "You turned racism into entertainment. You destroyed lives for fun. And you documented it all." He picked up his cell phone, which was still recording, and showed it to everyone. "Well, now I have documentation too. And unlike you, I'm not going to keep it a secret." Richard finally found his voice, but it came out as a growl. "You have no idea who you're messing with, kid. My family has connections that..." "That what?" Marcus interrupted him. "That they'll destroy me like they did the others? Except this time, the whole world will watch you try." He turned to Angela, who had remained in the corner of the room, trembling. "Angela, do you have children?" She nodded. "They deserve to grow up in a world where this doesn't happen anymore." He held out his hand to her. "Will you help me make sure that happens?" Angela looked around the room, at the pale faces of the Whitmores, at the uncomfortable guests, at the cameras that suddenly seemed much less discreet. Then she took a deep breath and walked over to Marcus's side. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining strength. Yes, I do. Marcus nodded and looked one last time at Isabella. I really thought you were different. Then he and Angela walked toward the front door, leaving behind a room full of people who finally understood that their actions had consequences. And that those consequences were about to become very, very public. By 11 a.m. the next morning, the video had gone viral. Marcus had spent the early hours of the morning carefully editing the recordings, creating a 15-minute documentary that exposed not only the Whitmores, but an entire system of racism disguised as social entertainment. He didn't just post it on one platform. The video went to YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn simultaneously. The title was simple: How Beverly Hills Millionaires Turn Racism into Entertainment. Within 6 hours, it had 2 million views. Within 12 hours, it was being covered by all the major news outlets. Within 18 hours, #Whitmore Files was trending on Twitter, and independent investigators were finding other victims willing to tell their stories. Marcus woke up to his phone ringing incessantly. Reporters, lawyers, activists, even some Hollywood executives interested in the rights to the story. But the call he had been waiting for most came at 2 p.m. Marcus Thompson? This is Detective Rodriguez from the Beverly Hills Police Department. I'd like to talk to you about the recordings you posted. 2 hours later, Marcus was sitting in an interrogation room, but not as a suspect. As a key witness in a rapidly expanding criminal investigation. What have you found? He asked. Detective Rodriguez opened a thick file. More than we expected. Your recordings gave us probable cause to search the Whitmore's computers and cell phones. We found edited videos of at least 8 different black men over the past 3 years. Marcus felt his stomach churn. 8. Including a Los Angeles city councilman, 2 doctors, a university professor, and 3 students. All of them had their careers damaged after these videos circulated in specific circles. She turned a page. We also discovered that it wasn't just entertainment. Richard Whitmore used these sessions for blackmail. Several of the victims received demands for money or political favors in exchange for not having the videos widely distributed. Blackmail. Marcus felt a wave of nausea. Extortion, conspiracy, invasion of privacy, possible forced intoxication. We're building a solid case. Rodriguez leaned forward. But we need you to testify officially. Marcus didn't hesitate. Whatever you need. That afternoon, as he walked back to his car, Marcus saw Angela waiting for him in the parking lot. How are you? He asked. Scared, she admitted. But relieved. I lost my job, obviously. But for the first time in years, I slept through the night. Marcus smiled. And your kids? Proud of their mom. She wiped away a tear. My 12-year-old son said I'm a hero. He's right. Angela hesitated, then said, I wanted to ask you something. When all this is over, would you come to dinner with my family? A real dinner, where no one will try to humiliate you or destroy you. Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears for the first time since it all began. I'd love to. At that moment, Marcus's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but he answered it. Marcus? This is Kevin Williams. The doctor who they destroyed before you. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. Dr. Williams. Did you see the news? I did. And I wanted to thank you. For 5 months, I lived thinking I was crazy, that I had imagined everything. That somehow I had caused my own ruin. His voice trembled. You gave me my sanity back. And now, we're going to get justice. For all of us. 3 months later, Marcus sat in the front row of a crowded courtroom, watching Richard and Catherine Whitmore being handcuffed after receiving their sentences. Richard, 5 years in prison for extortion, conspiracy, and invasion of privacy. Catherine, 3 years for aiding and abetting and obstruction of justice. Isabella, 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service. But the arrests were just the beginning. The case sparked a federal investigation into discriminatory practices at elite social events. 6 other families were indicted in similar schemes. The FBI created a special task force to investigate what the media came to call entertainment racism. Angela received $2 million in damages through a civil lawsuit and used the money to open a community center in her neighborhood. She also went back to school, studying law at night. Kevin Williams had his position at the hospital restored with full compensation, and now leads a national program supporting victims of racial discrimination. Marcus was accepted into a PhD program at Stanford with a full scholarship, but before that, he spent 6 months traveling around the country, speaking at universities and corporations about systemic racism and the importance of ordinary people having the courage to do the right thing. The night before his classes began at Stanford, Marcus was having dinner at Angela's house, as promised. Her children, 12-year-old Miguel and 9-year-old Sophia, asked intelligent questions about engineering and social justice throughout the meal. "Uncle Marcus," Sophia asked as they ate Angela's homemade cake, "do you still get mad at those bad people?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he said honestly. "But mostly I feel sorry for them. They've wasted so much time and energy hating people who could have been their friends, their colleagues, their families. They've missed out on meeting amazing people like your mom." Angela smiled and served Marcus another slice of cake. "And what are you going to do now?" "At Stanford. I'm going to study solar energy systems for underserved communities. I want to create technology that really helps people in need." Marcus paused, looking around the simple but loving table. "And I'm also going to keep telling this story. Because there are still a lot of people like the Whitmores out there." Miguel leaned forward, curious. "Do you think they'll try to do it again when they get out of prison?" "Maybe," Marcus replied. "But now the world is watching. And there are people like your mother who will no longer remain silent." Marcus and Angela's story had become something much bigger than simple revenge against a racist family. The Whitmore Protocol, as the media came to call it, had inspired a national wave of reports about covert racism in elite circles. Universities implemented mandatory racial awareness programs. Corporations revised their policies on corporate events and entertainment. The state of California passed a law making it illegal to secretly record people with the intent of racial humiliation. But the most significant change was personal. Marcus was in his lab at Stanford, testing low-cost solar panels, when he received an unexpected call. "Marcus? It's Isabella." He paused, holding the phone away from his ear for a moment. He had thought about her many times over the year, but had never tried to contact her. "Hi, Isabella. I know I have no right to call you," her voice was different, more mature, less confident. "But I wanted you to know that I finished my community service last week." "Where did you work?" "Community center in East LA, teaching adult literacy." She paused. It was eye-opening. Marcus waited. "Marcus, I grew up in that house with those people, thinking that was normal. That it was funny. I never thought about what it meant to you. To the people we were hurting. And now I understand that there is no neutrality. Either you fight racism, or you are complicit in it." Isabella took a deep breath. "I wanted to ask your forgiveness. Not because I expect you to forgive me, but because you deserve to hear it." Marcus walked over to the window of his lab, looking out at the sunny Stanford campus. "Isabella, I can't pretend it didn't hurt. That I didn't feel betrayed. I know. But I've also learned that holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. You had to learn the hard way, but you learned. That matters." There was a long silence. "Are you happy?" she finally asked. Marcus smiled, thinking of Angela's graduation party the week before, the progress of his solar panels, the dozens of young black people who had sought him out to tell their own stories of discrimination. "Yes," he said. "I'm making the difference I always wanted to make." Angela Santos Thompson, she had changed her name after marrying Marcus's older brother, stood in front of a classroom full of law students at UCLA, telling her story as part of a course on legal ethics and civil courage. "The question is not whether you will witness injustice," she told the attentive students. "The question is what you will do when you witness it." In the front row, a young black student raised her hand. "Professor Santos Thompson, weren't you afraid of losing everything?" Angela smiled. "I lost my job. But I found my voice. And a voice is worth more than any salary." After class, Angela walked across campus to her car, where she found Marcus waiting for her. He was back in California to defend his doctoral thesis the following week. "How was class?" he asked. "Inspiring." One student told me she's going to specialize in civil rights because of our story. They walked together toward the parking lot. Do you have any regrets? Marcus asked. Angela thought for a moment. I regret not acting sooner. For letting other people suffer because I was afraid. She looked at him. What about you? I regret trusting Isabella for so long. But I don't regret going to that party. Because if I hadn't gone, you would never have found the courage to act. And how many other people would still be suffering? As they drove through the city, they passed a billboard advertising the new movie based on their story, The Ticket, which would premiere the following month, with all proceeds going to civil rights organizations. Do you think our story will really make a difference in the long run? Angela asked. Marcus pointed to a diverse group of young people walking together on the sidewalk, laughing and talking naturally. Look around, Angela. Change has already begun. One courageous conversation at a time. This wasn't just a story about racism or revenge. It was a story about the power of an ordinary person to make the right choice at the right time. Angela Santos wasn't rich, she wasn't powerful, she didn't have connections. But she had something we all have, the ability to choose between silence and truth. Marcus Thompson wasn't looking to be a hero. He just wanted to have dinner with his girlfriend's family. But when confronted with injustice, he chose to fight rather than run away. The real lesson here isn't about evil millionaires or elaborate conspiracies. It's about the small moments of courage that change the world. It's about recognizing that when we witness injustice and do nothing, we become part of the problem. How many times have you seen something wrong and stayed silent? How many racist jokes have you listened to in silence? How many unjust situations have you witnessed without acting? Angela risked her job to save a stranger. Marcus risked his safety to expose the truth. And together, they changed not only their own lives, but created ripples that continue to spread. The question remains, what will your choice be when it's your turn to witness? Will you be the silence that allows injustice to continue, or will you be the voice that interrupts it? Because in the end, it's not grand speeches or massive demonstrations that change the world. It's ordinary people in decisive moments, choosing to do the right thing even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when no one else is watching. Justice is not a destination. It's a choice we make every day. And sometimes, all it takes is a folded note and the courage to deliver it to the right person. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own choices and responsibilities, share it. Because stories only have power when they are told, and change only happens when ordinary people decide they have seen enough injustice. What will be your next courageous choice?